1-1, this is Shadow 8 there, remote engagement out. Rifle out. Sector 1-1, this is Shadow.
Well, I think, for the non-commissioned officer corps, I think the biggest turning point for us when we got very professionalized was coming out of the height of the Vietnam War, right, when we transitioned to an all-volunteer force. That's where we, started to professionalize our professional military education and started to really put in what we do for the Army as NCOs.
I don't know if this is historical, but it's personal experience, so I guess I'm old, so it's historical, right? So it was Thanksgiving week in 1988. I got done doing PT, and back in the 80s you had 6:30 formation, 9 o'clock formation, 11:30 formation, 1300 formation, and 1700 formation. So at the 1700 formation, my platoon sergeant came to me. He's like, Inman, you're taking the Ranger School PT test on Wednesday. I'm like, Roger that, Sergeant. It wasn't, are you ready to take it? Because I probably would have said no, right? Took the PT test, passed, went to Ranger School in January, right? Fast forward about a year, he's like, Inman, you're going to the sergeant board. Roger that, Sergeant. A year later, Inman, you're going to the staff sergeant board. Roger that, Sergeant. It was the NCO who saw something in their subordinates and didn't ask them if they were ready, but sent them to go do things. And that carried on when I was a platoon sergeant. I had a first sergeant, and I showed up back from a TDY, went in to take the first sergeant's meeting. He's like, Inman, stay after. And I'm like, okay, what's up, first sergeant? He's like, congratulations, you're going to jump master school. And I'm like, great, first sergeant, when? And he's like, don't you fucking question me, Monday. So this was a Friday before the internet that I was going to report to jump master school on Monday. It happened again with Pathfinder school, it happened again with Halo school, but it's something we need our NCOs to do is like see something in somebody and send them, don't ask them, because we know they're ready. And if you do that with a soldier, they're probably gonna like, hey, they trust me, I can do this, I can get through it. So when I became a platoon sergeant, I did the same thing. I did it as a first sergeant. As a sergeant major, I made one of my sergeant majors go to airborne school. So it's something we need to do as NCOs, and I think that kind of speaks to the power of what we do every day.
I would highlight historically the NCO Corps has always been a part of the Army. And it's never been just officers and soldiers and privates. There's always been this recognition that there is a need for that level of leadership in between the person who is day to day interacting with the troops, making things happen, taking care of troops. We forget simple things like an army runs on its stomach, right? You've heard that saying before, but like making sure that troops are fed, that they have the equipment they need, that they have the training that they need. That has existed since the beginning of our Army, and I think that we can forget that that's always been there, but it has been, and I think historically that's a really important fact about our Army.
Well, like I mentioned, it has changed quite a bit. I can still remember coming in and the segregation that we had back then where, the females were trained differently than the males, and we didn't really get to see, we didn't come together as a team until later on in our career, or not career, later on in our training. So I think that in terms of evolution and change has been kind of significant. And I love now that we're all integrated with one team, because really in the end of the day, it's about the team. We have to be able to work together. So I'd say that was a pivotal moment when we figured that out.
Just it's great to see that also the Army Reserve is turning 117 in April. And then the U.S. Army is 250. I just see the transformation of how we've grown to just be better at what we do. From the educational piece, we were stressing a lot where back when I was Sergeant Betty, the PME wasn't written the way it is now. Now we're stressing that NCOs gotta learn how to speak better, write better, and just the communication piece. And once now at USARC, we're making sure that soldiers within the USARC building or our OCAR building, not just sit there and do computer work. We're getting out to make sure we can shoot and communicate. So the thing is, once you get you in a position and at those levels, we need to put you back in the formations so that what you've learned at that level you take back. And when you go back, I just don't want you to be a computer-based soldier. I want you to be fully rounded, be able to shoot, move, communicate, and take soldiers out to the field. So we have evolved from just being NCOs that can just trigger squeeze, but we're also a part of decision making. And NVMP is the thing that we stress to make sure that soldiers are educated and can speak at any level. If we're speaking to general officers or we're just speaking amongst ourselves, we can carry a conversation that can be value added in any conversation. So that's a big change I've seen from where, and that's going into the Army's birthday, the transformation from just being receive the orders and go forward. Mission command is a big thing. So we receive the orders, and without full continual guidance, we can perform and execute because we're now educated both on the military side and on the civilian side to go out and execute missions as we receive.
So is there any historical facts about the NCO Corps of the Army on its 250th birthday that I'd like to highlight? Yes, I would. Although it's not exactly 250 years this date and time, the Continental Army, till now the Army of America, is 250 years old. So I would kind of highlight the discussion I mentioned on the NCO Corps as the backbone of our Army back to this place called Valley Forge, right? And of course, Sergeant Major Holland's going to talk about the Blue Book, standards and discipline. I am. Not because I think that's something that we should inherently be doing all the time, because, von Steuben wrote the Blue Book, and inside that Blue Book was the foundational document that gave authorities and responsibilities to the non-commissioned officer of the Continental Army, which is now the non-commissioned officer of the U.S. Army. So when you look back as far as a historical moment in our Army, our nation's history, and for the men and women who wear the stripes and the cloth of our nation, von Steuben, Valley Forge, non-commissioned officer corps became one of the most important aspects of our Army, which sets us apart from any other nation. Although other nations have NCOs, they can replicate, never duplicate. Ours are trusted in power more than anybody else. I'll put my chips in the middle of the table on that one, but I would say that's the most important story I could tell you.
I would say the evolution of how we got to where we are now, meaning how we created both training and doctrine command, 53 years ago, forces command, 53 years ago, and how we really put the professionalism into the training and the leader development and the education of what we're doing. And I don't think we could be where we're at if we did not do that and really super professionalize those things, because everything we do is the envy across the globe, especially how we build our non-commissioned officers. And those things have to carry on forward, right? I mean, they really do. And so I'm really just proud of, over the 250 years, of course, I've only done 29 years of the 250 years. But you have seen how we've grown in training. You've seen how we've grown in leader development and education, how we've got more flexible with things, how we're able to get lessons learned into our educational and training path a lot quicker. And it just makes us more lethal and makes us better soldiers every day.
Yeah, we had an army before we had a nation. So if you think about, when our Declaration of Independence was signed, ratified and signed, we had an army before that. So our Army has been a pathway to defending what we thought was important, from Paul Revere saying the British are coming all the way to World War II, to the War on Terror. And it's important that our Army continues to be a vocal point for our nation with regard to defending our freedoms, our Constitution, our way of life, being a trusted institution for everybody to want to be around and be part of and follow, to be confident in our leaders and the fact that we're going to execute the mission effectively. We're going to follow the rules of armed conflict and the law, and it's really going to be about, the American way of life.
The role of the non-commissioned officer, I think, has evolved over time. I just kind of spoke a little bit about it earlier, but I believe as the Army has evolved, so has the non-commissioned officer corps in terms of what we do. NCOs today are doing a lot more than we were, originally trained and educated for. We've taken up a lot more prominent positions. 50 years ago, when we first started the Sergeant Major's Academy, there was no NCOs in charge of it. It wasn't until 2009 when SMA Ray Chandler retired, became the first enlisted commandant of the Sergeant Major Academy. So I think that was a real prominent time where the officer corps said, hey, you know, we got trust and confidence in what our non-commissioned officer corps is doing. We're going to pull out that officer that's sitting in the Sergeant Major Academy over top of it and put a non-commissioned officer in charge of it. And so I think as time has gone on, we have evolved to a role where our officers trust us to lead our soldiers, and they give us more responsibility than we've ever had before.